Welcome to the Seraphine Podcast. I am Seraphine Arocha. This is Chunk, who never leaves my lap, but the person who I'd like you to give your attention to today is one of my best friends, and his name is Christian Noni. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good. This is, it's so funny how when I have brought people on this podcast, a lot of them have been close friends of mine. And you and I are close friends on so many different levels.
Totally.
Not only do we work together, which also creates this interesting dynamic because he's my boss. But then in the next realm, he and his future husband are me and my husband's like best friends. We love to hang out with them. And then we have so many similar interests.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring you on today because you have so many beautiful interwoven stories that I think really will be something that when someone listens to it, it'll maybe awaken some things in them or remind them that they're not alone.
Sure.
So to begin with, I'd like you to just kind of give me just a little history timeline, just of where you came from.
Okay.
So you were West Coast boy.
Yeah.
How you grew up, what's changed, not only obviously in your physical appearance, but what brought you to the Midwest.
Okay.
And then where you kind of are now. And I know that's a lot, but just take your time with it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on here. I really appreciate I really appreciate being here, Gosh, I don't know where to begin. So the timeline of life. So actually, I was born in upstate New York. I lived right on Lake Erie in this little small town, and it's actually called, well, not Buffalo, but it was actually, what was it called? Oh my God. Chautauqua. It's always hard to remember how to say that because I left there when I was about 10, and it was on a Native American reservation. And so if you can imagine, right, this white boy, if you will, on a Native American reservation, and that was, I think I was probably, my mom, my father, and myself were the only Caucasian people there within probably about, 15-mile radius. Anything exceeding that was going to be like Amish people.
That's so crazy.
And then on Lake Erie, which is where we grew up, you cross that lake, you're in Canada. So I always had this kind of joke saying like, I'm practically Canadian, you know what I mean? And so that was definitely a different upbringing, From there though, long story short, my parents, we moved around a lot. And I actually ended up in Huntington Beach, California. And I lived there probably from when I was about, 13 or 14 years old until recently. So I always, in one breath, will say I'm from upstate New York, but in the other breath, I'm saying I'm really from Huntington Beach, and that's like a beach town, and the way of life is way different, than anywhere else I've ever lived, because that's really all I've ever known, So my roots have been developed through Native Americans, if you will. But like social structure wise, and just hobbies and interests and personality as I develop, it comes from a beach town.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah. So why did your parents choose Chautauqua?
I actually don't know. They moved there before I was born, so I think it actually was just probably work related. I think my father, he was working for some kind of a corporation. We were a little bit low class, like below economy status, and so he was a hard worker. My parents, they both had two jobs. They both worked at the same corporation. It was called Red Wing, which I think is probably closed down by now. Yeah. And they both worked as janitors in a church that they actually funded, or they worked to get me to go be at school-wise, Yeah.
Interesting. So you actually went to school through a church.
Yeah.
And what was it like? What kind of church was it?
A Baptist Christian church.
That is wild.
In a Native American reservation.
That is so interesting.
So yeah.
So were your parents? Were you brought up in traditional religion?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was like my teacher, her name is Mrs. Forbes, and she was not only my teacher for all the subjects, she was also the principal. And funny enough, the maximum that we had, I think, was probably about 8 to 12 kids in the classroom the whole entire day. But if you got in trouble, she doesn't say go to my office. She just says go to my desk, and it's like 5 feet away,
Yeah.
And that was it. And so you got punished by your teacher and your principal all at the same by the same person. You know?
So when you left Chautauqua, and you moved to the West Coast. Schooling for you. What was schooling like for you?
So my parents separated when I was about 11 or 12. My mom remarried, and my parents took me into a private school in Southern California. And that was a lot different than what I was used to, you know.
Yeah.
And then along that, I really wasn't cut out for the public or the private school. They knew that that wasn't, how do I say, it wasn't my thing, if you will.
Yeah.
And I preferred the public school. You know,
Yeah.
I actually like diversity, and I grew up around diversity, and there was none of that at the private school.
That's so interesting. So was the private school expensive? Because you
Yeah.
came from not a lot of money.
Right.
So I'm sure your parents had a little bit of guilt
Yeah.
and was like trying to make up for it by bringing you into a private school.
Yeah.
Then you're miserable in the private school.
Yeah.
And then when you ended up exiting out of, were you still in private school in high school?
So I left private school, when was I? I think it was about like the 8th grade. So I actually entered high school, I'm trying to think here, my freshman or sophomore year.
Interesting.
Or public school, excuse me.
So high school to college experience, when did you come out?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
So I actually never had the opportunity of coming out, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing. It's where you have to kind of choose how you respond to situations. And so I actually had a hate crime. I got gay bashed. So
and it was pretty brutal, right? I mean, you almost like
died.
You almost died. Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
And that was a rough one because they were my friends essentially, and there was these 3 guys, and no one knew, but like I may have had a little crush on them here and there, but I was still I knew instinctually to kind of just stay quiet, don't talk about this, you know.
Yeah.
I knew that they were heterosexual, and I never tried anything like that. I was way too scared to. And then somehow it got around in school, you know, and long story short, they robbed my house, my parents' house. They did about $200,000 worth of damage. I mean, we're talking like, you know, cutting up couches. I play piano. So we have a baby grand piano that we got from a church.
Yeah.
And there's like, you know, carved like fag on
Yeah.
there and everything. Like we can't get it out to this day, you know. And when I came home, they beat me up, you know.
Yeah.
And then what's sad is that like the police didn't come until about an hour later, you know.
It's so interesting because yesterday I had a guest on who, her name's Landon Patterson, and she now is legally a female.
Oh, good.
And she was just talking about in the news just a few days ago, there were 3 transgender women, and they were beaten up on.
I heard about
and
that.
People got out their cameras, and then they didn't do anything. And a few of them yelled, "Oh, they're dudes."
Yeah.
The funny thing is, what really struck me about that, and I actually got into it last night because I was out with Johnny and a few of his friends who are, you know, your quintessential alpha men.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were talking about that and how, you know, they were like, well, you know, people get really upset if they're deceived. And I was like, well, I understand that, but no matter what, I'm like, can we all agree that to beat up on someone, male or female, dog,
Right.
or whatever, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because they all agreed, but there was this real talk and kind of this like uncomfortableness with deception. And I guess my question to you is that how have you found, since being kind of forced in a situation to where you came out in a brutal way,
Yeah.
and then trying to, you know, you've always had jobs to where you are kind of in front of everyone or trying to make people comfortable.
Yeah.
Because you're not only is he in a gym setting, so like he, you know, how we all are fitness people, and you're also directing a team. So there's this level of like, I hate to say it, a little bit of deception because you've got to have your boundaries
Right.
and privacy. And then you're also behind the camera. And with being behind a camera, you have to hold space for someone.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, you know, again, there's like a certain kind of boundaries too when you're, you know, observing or taking photographs.
Sure.
So I guess my question is that how do you navigate, like when you're your true self, when you're your most comfortable Christian self, to where you have to put on that like protective gear of, I'm a gay man, I'm in a prominently like white area of Kansas City.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have to watch yourself a lot?
You know, it's
Are you getting
interesting.
more comfortable?
I'm more comfortable now. I think because, you know, when you go through something like that physically, so the physical part of what happened on that whole gay bashing obviously does something to you. But I have to kind of say, like, it was such, I actually don't think that was the worst experience. What happened for 6 months or so after that is what really teaches you how strong you are, if you will. Yeah. And so after that happened, I got actually expelled from school. I got expelled from all the schools in Los Angeles.
Wow.
So that was one day where this is a victim of a hate crime. We are, and at the time it's different because I don't know why, we had attorneys, people were defending me, but for some reason they're like, he can't come back to school.
Yeah.
And so there was a little bit of a leeway with that. My face is on the news. People know now. If they didn't know I was gay, now they're watching TV. They click it on, boom, and there I am as this hate crime, and not this kid,
Yeah.
And so I had police. They would escort me from home to this private school. Well, not private school, I shouldn't say that, where actually I got my GED.
Yeah.
So I'm like in sophomore, I just entered sophomore year, and I'm basically testing out a GED just to actually get out of high school so I can actually move away to go to college.
Yeah.
And so during that time, you can imagine every single day having a police officer come to your house, put you in the car, put you in the back seat, lock the door, take you to, and every single day for 6 months. And then during the summertime, when I wasn't in school, because at the time we didn't have, what do you call it, where you can go, I always forget the term, but where you can finish school early.
Yeah, yeah.
I had to be house arrest. I was on house arrest for like 3 months.
That's insane.
So,
and it was it essentially for your protection?
Yeah, they call it that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I don't look back now. I have no animosity towards anyone. I'm very, very greatly appreciative of everyone that was so focused on my health and my well-being. But that gives you, that does something to you a little bit. And again, kind of going back, you have to decide how you handle that.
Yeah.
From being completely exposed to all over the news, I have no idea if the news was even broadcasted in New York City.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, my face could have been all over the nation. I don't know.
Yeah.
They protected that, And then having 3 months of yourself in house arrest upstairs by yourself, you get to learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so the answer, and I don't mean to be long-winded, but to answer your question, I have so much confidence now. I know exactly who I am. I know exactly who I'm not.
Yeah.
And I've got nothing to prove.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where when I come to somewhere like Kansas City or wherever, I don't have any issues discussing that I'm gay, that I have a fiance that's about to be my husband. I think I'm like 10 years way over that now.
Yeah. And as you should be. But I find myself still in situations, even with people that I love and care about, where their reactions initially, their knee-jerk reactions are always in this place of unknowing, and that creates discomfort.
Yeah.
And discomfort creates defensiveness.
Right.
And defensiveness usually has us say stupid shit at the end of the day.
Sure.
So I'm curious because I don't know the timeline of your fitness journey and when you were a photographer. I don't know how those correlate.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So, being on house arrest and going through all that, as a teenager, and then they're like, okay, you're free. You can do whatever you want now. I'm probably about 16 years old up to maybe 17. I gained a lot of weight, because then when you take off, when you have a dog in shelter for so long, then you say, you know what, you're good now. You can come out. You take off the collar. You're free. Yeah. I have no concept now at the time, like what was going on, what's reality.
Yeah.
So I gained a lot of weight. I gained about 300 pounds.
Well, and I would think too, I'm no psychiatrist, but I've been in a psychologist and psychiatrist's office many times, and I'm fascinated. I'll read and read and read, and says I'm in health and wellness. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I read a lot about is when there's trauma to the body.
Sure.
Usually you either pack on the pounds, or in my case, I decided to get down to bone thin.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting to where with weight, a lot of times it becomes this padding.
Yeah,
like
for
you
sure.
don't get to hurt me anymore.
Totally.
And then with, I think women, men do it too, but like you almost disappear.
Yeah.
And you become nothing. You're so, ugh.
Yeah.
So when you were, so you're overweight.
Yeah.
You're leaving, you're going out into the world again where you're like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, last time I was here, I got the shit beaten out of me.
Right, yeah.
I don't know what people are thinking of
Yeah.
me. So where did you go? What did you do?
So I moved away. I went to Colorado, and I think by this time I'm like 21, you know. And I mean, again, I was a little bit sheltered, so I have never even at that time had a drink. I had no idea what alcohol was, really, what you know, or what it was like to even be buzzed or anything like that. So I'm in Colorado, and I'm there for the next 8 years, and I'm a size 42-inch waist, 300 pounds, and I'm like, okay, well, let's go see what this means to mingle and meet people. And I went to like, you know, gay bars or straight bars or whatever. And I already stood away from the straight bars because I instinctually knew, I'm like, been there once, no, we're not going that again, you know. And then I learned, you know, the gay bars they're no different. You know, you're not being ridiculed for what you like. You're kind of being judged about how you look.
100%.
You know?
Yeah.
Around this time is also when I was like, well, I want to go to school. I want to learn. So, and go into surgery. You know, I've always wanted, I love pre-med, love surgery. And I think that's where it stems from in my youth, where, I like to fix things, like to help people. You know, I'm a healer, whatever you want to call it. So they both kind of, you know, go hand in hand. And so I learned then, I'm like, well, gosh, you know, the straight people over here don't like me because I'm gay. The gay people over here don't like me because I'm overweight, you know, and then you just kind of shut down again.
Yeah.
And so I just started, I had a really good trainer. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna start working out. I had no idea what to do. I did the diet pills, I did everything, you know, starving and, you know, didn't learn. And then the funny thing is that I was like, okay, I hit rock bottom, like emotionally. And this guy, what happened was I asked out this guy. He looked at me and he kind of rolled his eyes. He laughed and he just walked away. And I think that I broke into tears. I was like, oh my God, this is
crushed.
Yeah.
Crushed. Yeah.
So I went to this local gym, and then I had a really good trainer or an interview with this trainer, and she was actually the general manager. And what was crazy about it was you had to pay for these sessions with personal training. So I was like, okay. And I knew myself because I knew I procrastinated so much because I was already scared as it was from previous things. So I opened up 2 credit cards, and I got approved, and not. At the time I had no debt, so you know what I mean? They're like,
they're
sure.
like, there you go.
Yeah, here's 20 grand or whatever.
There you go ape shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And both credit cards were about $8,000 each on credit limit.
Yeah.
So I maxed them both out. I looked at her. I was like, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna marry. We're gonna get sessions.
Yeah.
And so I charged about $12,000 in personal training sessions. She's like, honey, like this is not a refundable. It's our policy.
Yeah.
And I was like, good.
It's okay.
Let's do it. And that was my commitment to her, and vice versa.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. So then from there, so you went and you were going to school also, thinking that you were going to go into the medical field, and you did briefly for a while, correct?
So I went to an accredited school. After 2 years, I was a surgical technologist. I worked in the OR, where essentially, you know, my skill set comes in the actual operating room. So when a person goes under, I'm probably the last person that they see but vaguely remember. Yeah. And I might be the first person that they see but never remember. They probably will remember like the registered nurse, you know. So I'm in there, I'm the surgeon's assistant essentially. I'm holding open. I used to actually open up bodies or people, patients, suture clothes, things like that.
Interesting. So I wonder if that's what brought in your fascination with now. We'll talk in a little bit about the Embody Museum. So what pivoted you from the medical profession? Where were you going next after this?
So there was such a weird thing about how life evolved. So it was just a rolling ball of, I don't know how to explain it. I guess I was just learning about what I loved, right?
Yeah.
I'm starting to lose weight. I'm really liking this career where I'm saving people or helping people be better, right? Because it kind of brings me comfort.
Yeah.
And then I'm learning, well, I kind of want to get out and travel as well. I double majored in college. So I specialize I studied pre-med, and I also studied human osteology, so the study of human bones, but through a lens of archaeology, So at this point, I am just so obsessed with just the term life and what it means to live, both academically and emotionally or spiritually, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so when I was taking pictures of people, I was also going on to these trips and whatnot to like Southeast Asia. I want to see what that's like. Let's go do that now.
How did you get involved with your first trip?
So I actually, that's kind of funny. So I was also, it's kind of a weird thing. I graduated in surgical technology, but I was still going to school studying other things. So when you get past a bachelor's, I can also become an additional, what you call like accredited to first assistant in surgical technology. So I was still studying while working, while training, right? And in the archaeology department, I was studying about human evolution and things like that. And so I was like, well, I want to go travel to this one tribe. I just want to see what it's like. I've never done this kind of stuff before. I'm ready to get out. I'm so raw at the time.
Was this the Maasai tribe, your first visit with them, or no?
No, this was where was my first one? I think I was actually where was I? Thailand.
Thailand, interesting.
Yeah, the jungles of Thailand, and up in the northern area called Mae Hong Son. And I was studying the Padang tribe. They had these neck rings, right? And I loved it. And I thought, this is cool. I could use this for my dissertation, things like that. Took some pictures. Long story short, they're like, you take really nice photos. And I was like, okay, well, thanks, kind of thing.
The hobby.
Yeah, it's just kind of having fun, Again, when you're stuck in your room for 3 months, you kind of get
to learn. Yeah.
So they're like, well, can you keep this going? And can we have some of these pictures? Like, yeah, just take them. I don't care. Yeah. And then a friend of mine noticed there was this contest online with National Geographic. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. Like you could submit your own picture. And I thought it was going to be like you win like a sweepstakes, like a free camera or something, And it was a 4-week series. And so I submitted my first picture. I can't remember now. It was like your best black and white photo. Yeah. And out of all these people, they're like, oh, you won. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. Like, what do I win? Like a hat, you know? And then the second week, it was like best landscape. The third week, I think it was the best portrait. The fourth week, I can't even remember now. Like it was best like abstract photo. Yeah. And I just kept submitting. And I got busy with school. I got busy with work. And I didn't think of it. Didn't check my emails, all that stuff. And I didn't know for like 3 weeks after, almost a month after, they were contacting me.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. Like,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like, all right.
Yeah. So after that, they're like, we need to fax you something or scan. You have to fill out this I-9 form. And I was like, an I-9? Like, I don't understand. They're like, well, no, you won the contest. I go, I won.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, that's fun. Again, I'm thinking like, I got like a hat now. Now I got a camera set or something like that. Yeah. And I got employed.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
How long did you work with National Geographic?
About 6 years, 7 years.
So was that hard to walk away from the medical field?
Yeah, it was. But I was like, I knew at that time, I'm like, you start to kind of value life in a different way. Like having almost died before, I kind of had like this free spirit where I'm like, I'm just going to do this. Like if it screws up, then fine. At least I tried. What's going to happen? So
was there ever a place that you visited?
Yeah.
That you forgot about your pain? Like you just were like so enmeshed in the culture?
Every day. Every time I traveled, every time I did an operation, a piece of that pain went away because there was a sense of healing, right? Yeah. Whether it was seeing me be a part of something that healed someone else, like a stomach ulcer or cancer. And then when I would travel abroad, the healing was they weren't judging me about being gay. They didn't. It was just customary in their customs. You know, they didn't care if I was a guy or whatever. And so I was like, this is what now going back. This is what life is about, right? Yeah. Just no preconceived notions, no judgment. You're just there. You're just appreciative just for being who you are.
Was there ever a time when you were taking photographs that you ever felt like you were predatory ever? But because I know National Geographic is so, I mean, they are like mean, I remember as a kid just going through the pictures and I hold it in the highest regard. But there is also a sense of when someone takes your picture. You know, I think I read somewhere about a photograph like captures a bit of your soul or something like that. So did you ever have a moment where you had to put your camera down?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
That you were like, I can't do this?
Absolutely. The first one that comes up right now was in Varanasi, India. I was there for 3 months. I was along the Ganges River where it's the holiest river in the holiest part of India, or what they consider the holiest part of the world, where there are cremations. And there are actually decomposing bodies in the river too. And so I knew this walking into that territory, and I saw a cremation, and I was like, you know what? I can't photograph this. Like, this is just rude. And knowing that other people have photographed it, I kind of just said, it's already been documented. I don't need to be doing this right now. And I just put the camera away. So with that being said, how do you feel about the world we live in right now, where everything is documented, even people having the shit beaten out of them? I mean, like, is it like where it's so interesting, because I think photography is so beautiful and healing, and it opens up our minds to different cultures, but it's also dangerous because it can also be people looking and not understanding or abusing or it's images, and it's image after image after image after image that we're looking at, and it tells us a story that we don't even know because we're not talking to each other. Exactly.
What do you think has changed since you being a photographer and National Geographic to now you're no longer working with them, but you still take photography? What's changed in you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I look at photography or videography. I'm older, so I laugh at the whole iPhones. I think it's just kind of, I have one. I'm like obsessed with it. It's like my pacemaker. But at the same breath, I think it's irrelevant. I don't think it's necessary. You know, photography and videography and photo recording, all that stuff, I do see that as an opportunity. But what we send out there is really where it kind of reflects what we've learned. I think it's good that we document the good and the bad so we know how to address it. Yeah. But the question really is, are we addressing it? You know,
and also what we, you know, you brought up India, and I've been thinking a lot about things we've westernized or things we've taken from other cultures, and then also what we take from ourselves. By, like, even with my own partner, there are moments where he's like, why do you have to take a picture of this moment? Like, why can't you just be in the moment? This is a sacred moment for us. Yeah. And then that sense of like, well, I want the memory of it, you know, and just understanding too, when I go through just old photography from Pentax cameras where my mom used to, you know, in the black and white, you know, like her dark room, you know, there was a process of like getting your pictures, and now it's so immediate. I guess it's just a weird feeling for me now because, you know, I'm doing this podcast, right? And I have all the best intentions behind it, but I'm also, there's a part of me that's like, this is sacred. It's my learning. It's moments with another person. And I want other people to hear other people's stories. But then there's this real sense of like putting yourself out there. And then people judging you or almost perverting like what your intention was. And even people that I love, like hearing my words or seeing what I wear, or you know, if I hug someone a little too close, like those are things where it just makes me a little like I don't know what's right and I don't know what's wrong. And there are days where I love what I'm doing, and there are days you just want to step away and never look at your phone. So I guess that leads me to my next question of when you stepped away from National Geographic, why did you?
You know, I don't know. It was good. I mean, like, it was a great company. I love them. I have high respects for them. But our technology has modernized so fast that it, in a way, kind of put us out of business.
Yeah.
Like Instagram.
Yeah.
What took me 5 hours, when I was in Peru and I got Machu Picchu, and I spent 5 hours editing, trying to get that sunlight just a little bit better. And now you can done within of a button on Instagram, of a filter setting, and I'm like, oh my God. And that's no disrespect to Instagram. I think it's a great company. I think that's just, change is permanent.
Yeah.
But it kind of also, I don't know. It just things shifted a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah. So when you walked away, you kind of dove like head first, right, into health and fitness.
Yeah.
And talk to me about that journey. But then also, I feel like you never could shake the bones.
Yeah.
And you could never shake the culture.
Yeah.
Because there's this part of you that's like this health fitness instructor, but there's also this person who, to me, is like Indiana Jones with like this beautiful, like, story with a little bit of darkness. And like, because for our viewers, Christian collects. You can say it.
I guess you could say, I collect tribal antiquities. And so, to go back real quickly about the fitness and how that kind of started and why I left Nat Geo, it's kind of in a way, I guess I never stopped doing what I love. I just changed the outlet, because when I take photos with people, with the tribes that I would live with, I'd live with headhunters, for 3 months. I'm not just there for like a weekend with some tourists in an Airbnb. I am in Vanuatu, the South Pacific Islands. I'm living on a piece of hay for 3 months. The nearest Starbucks is like 4,000 miles away. You know what I mean? I didn't have cell phone reception, so I really had to just be there in the moment and like raw.
And physical, I would think.
Oh, absolutely. And that was another thing too, is it kind of helped me like lose weight a little bit, and whatnot. But like, if you can imagine, when you're with a tribe for 3 months, you both don't speak the same language. It's kind of pidgin. You're using like your hands all the time, your expressions, and exaggerating these gestures. So I'm bonding with them.
Yeah.
Camera documenting it or not. And so when I left that company, I still wanted to connect with people, So I'm like, okay, well, I got a perspective of the world around me. I've walked down the streets of Tokyo, and I've had a very, very blessed life. Don't get me wrong. I've seen chaos where riots are in Indonesia and things like that. Like, I've seen what, in my mind, I'm still photographing.
Yeah.
I'm just now doing it inside of a studio, because now I want to hear other people's stories, just like how you're doing this, know. And I wanted to, as I was losing weight, I wanted to hear other people, how they lost weight and why they got into fitness, because it's the same. It's, I really don't see fitness in what I do as a business. I really just genuinely want to connect. Yeah. And then I want to be so pure in that moment. I don't care if a camera's there, because it really doesn't need to be,
Yeah.
So
I totally understand that. It's a weird thing too, where I almost forget now.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm not, the only time I'm really conscious about it is if I'm like posing or I'm with people that I'm not 100% comfortable with. Like, or I'm just I have to kind of gauge, like, are they comfortable?
Yeah.
Or like, so when did your collection start with your artifacts?
Sure.
And then where did the idea of Embody Museum come from? So kind of take me, because we went to fitness, and now it's like, what was it always there? Did you always have the artifacts, and then
always
it just
had
grew?
it? Yeah. So when I kept living with tribes, they would gift you things like their heirlooms, things that are a couple hundred years old that belong to their great grandparents. They would just give me these things, and so what I would try and do is I would try and pay for it, although the currency is different. So for an example, like, I've been given some funerary objects, and I bought about 50 chickens, and I gave it to them, and I bought about 40 pigs before, and I think it cost me probably about $15, and what they've given me would probably sell in some Sotheby's auction house for like about 15 grand,
Wow.
Yeah, like, it's crazy, So I've always been collecting, and so now it's become kind of an extension of, now that I'm not living with them presently, I still you know, as I was saying earlier about where times are changing,
Yeah.
these people are vanishing away.
Yeah.
So it's important to me that people know their stories, and that I actively pursue any way I can to preserve their land so these people can continue to live and their tradition still lives.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I'm curious if you don't
Yeah.
mind sharing
Sure.
some of what you have, just to give people an idea. Christian's home, I've been lucky enough to visit, and inside of his home, there's a totem, right? It almost
yeah.
it's like a totem.
Yeah.
And there are these different skulls.
Mm-hmm.
There's different jewelry, and some people might even think it's a bit macabre.
Yeah.
But I love the macabre. That's the thing that's so crazy is October's coming up. And I can't wait, because I'm all about. I'm about ghost stories, because ghost stories help us remember feelings and people and feel and everything that kind of goes along with what keeps memories alive.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
So what do you have in your box?
So we're about to go through, let's see, I'll keep it up here.
Yeah.
We're about to walk, not literally, well, kind of, about 6,000 miles over a span of 2,000 years.
Oh, that's crazy.
So one thing about tribal antiquities that's so fun and I love about it is that when I was in Peru, you know, again, working in human archaeology, I also got the opportunity to work in excavation sites.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all what we call pre-Columbian.
Okay.
So this is kind of cool because this is all jewelry and it's all gold.
Wow.
This is part of the actual Embody collection called the Gold Collection.
Uh-huh.
And these are all what we call bodily adornments. So it's essentially all forms of jewelry. But the cool thing about it is, this is going to be a little history lesson for the kids out there that are into body piercings and tattoos and such.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
It's funny because I usually talk really loud and really flamboyant, but it's so funny when I'm around things that have like years on them, or to me what's called sacred.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm in a church or if I'm in a museum, you know, I immediately go back to that little girl that's like, be quiet,
Yeah.
honor the beauty of the painting or whatever.
For sure.
So all right, so take us through each one. I'm so curious.
So I think a little bit about me that is kind of interesting, that this might be like the Indiana Jones of me coming out. So a lot of people, when they first meet me, they see that I'm heavily tattooed. I have my left arm is black. You know, I had this done in Samoa, and I have these piercings in my ears. So when you live with these people, you get kind of nutty with them after a while.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
You take on these traditions, and so I think it's kind of cool to learn how these traditions still remain in our culture today, whether we see the connection or not.
Yeah.
So for an example. These are gold earrings, and they actually archaeologists thought they were a baby rattler.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're actual ear plugs. So when you see the kids today having their earlobes stretched out,
Yeah.
or the term gauged or whatnot, this is actually where it transcended from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So how would that even stay in the ear? Because
Good.
it's like, I have really heavy earrings. I love Dylan Lex, and she's got these beautiful earrings, but there are days where I'm like, there's a couple of them that are pretty heavy, and I'm like, it's going to come right out of my ear.
Yeah.
So
for something like this is actually hollow. There's a little pin in the back here. So this is from ancient Peru here. This is probably about, I'd say, about 1000 BC.
Wow.
Around there. And the little pin back here is a piece of string that would be attached to the other side. So while it went through the earlobe, and this is the front adornment of it, it would actually have a piece of string that would tap around, or be strung around the back of your head.
Oh.
And kind of like tied like a bow. Yeah.
that's crazy.
And so
Yeah.
not only would kind of support the weight a little bit, but it would keep them kind of angled frontwards, you know. So yeah.
That's wild. And then did you find that out? Is it because of, I mean, how do you find that out? Because I'm thinking of a skull, right?
Yeah.
And our ears are just tissue, right? They deteriorate off of our head.
Yeah.
So like how was it found out that these were not a rattle?
Very good. So we kept seeing over time that these were actually always placed where earrings are placed in the actual burials. So a lot of times, like the Inca times, they would have the person lay down, obviously. There'll be strands of necklaces, and you can see it just kind of, as the person, you know, decomposes, if you will,
Yeah.
over thousands of years, a lot of dirt, the compressed dirt below them, above them, kind of hardens, and it gets stronger, it gets more dense, and it literally just holds everything in place. So those earrings were actually probably worn in that person.
Wow.
And then as time occurred, it just kind of froze in space.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And how, again, it's just examining, because you could create some story about the person who died losing a child or something like that. I could see where we intellectualize, or we can bring in our own stories.
Right.
And then be like, actually, no, there was no dead child. It was called ears and earrings, and it was adornment. It was actually a really happy story.
Definitely.
So interesting. So then the next ones that you have there that look like gold buttons to me.
Yeah, so these are fun. I love these so much. So this is actually what we call a librette. So a lot of people who have like their lower lip pierced, these are the same thing. So I'll step forward, or I'll go actually back here a little bit. So they used to, this is actually also pre-Columbian. This is actually from Mexico. So this little adornment here is actually made out of solid obsidian. And this is actually what would go through the actual piercing.
That's so interesting. You know, obsidian is the truth stone.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love obsidian. It's literally like, if you wear it, it's one of the stones that, you know, and again, a lot of people don't like the whole like Reiki thing and where do the stones come from and are we assimilating?
Yeah.
For me, I picked up a piece of obsidian and it was literally like my whole body. Me and my husband had this moment. We were like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So obsidian, and then you would place it.
Yeah, just through the actual piercing. So what this little flat part, what's interesting about this is obsidian is a type of glass, right? It's a volcanic glass. And this is made by hand.
Interesting.
We're not talking Dremels. We're not talking sandpaper. This is made by, it's basically two types of sticks and a type of like a grass that goes in between the sticks, and they wrap it around, and they'll actually dip it in like a watery sand, and they're just kind of filing it.
No way.
And so you can imagine, this is all again by hand and wood, and if that were to break, and there actually are, we see a lot of them just accidentally broken, or where they kind of started it and they couldn't complete it, you know?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the time it took?
I can't even imagine.
You know?
The other thing that's so ironic to me is obsidian, because it's associated with truth telling, is that it's here in the mouth.
It's in the mouth, yeah.
Wow, that's super cool.
So this would go through, and you know, there's different classes as well in society. So you could have a librette. They can be small. This is probably about a standard size. It's about 1/2 inch in diameter of the gauge of the actual piercing. And some people, like in our culture, they have a little bling, you know?
I love it.
And this bling is this little piece of gold here. And this is solid gold. It's a hollow piece inside, and it fits over the actual ornament.
Interesting.
So now, how do I say this? We go from your Toyota to your Lamborghini, you know, kind of a thing.
Interesting.
Kind of a car, if you will.
That's super cool.
Yeah, so this is your bling now.
Wow. And then as they get bigger, is the hole bigger?
So as time goes on, you want to have the more gold you have, the more rich you are, you know.
Yeah.
So they would get really obsessed with, you know, how much gold can they carry. So this is the same exact style. They call this a Tirona. Yeah. And you can see that size hole in there is the size of the piercing that would go in there.
Interesting. But the actual hole itself really isn't enlarging, because like
it is.
It's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
That's wild. Oh my God.
Yeah. And it gets even larger. This is the biggest one I've ever seen. So this is actually from the Met Museum in New York.
Wow.
This is see, there's no stone.
Yeah.
There's a little bell.
No way.
And it's solid. It's a solid piece of gold. It's one construction. So that is literally how thick that piercing was.
And it punches through? Wow.
So it kind of like, the piercing gets a little bit loose over time, you know, so you're kind of able to kind of pop in that little flare piece over it. And this was worn regularly, you know. Wow. And what's interesting is that little bell, just like with the earplugs, would be associated with like a dance. So you could actually hear the person dance or whatnot, or whether they were going with like a chant or some kind of a shamanistic kind of experience.
That's so wild.
Interesting. That's
so cool. And I'm guessing this last one is for the nose. Like
very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what's cool about the nose is because the piercing is so thin here, but it's solid one piece. So you had to have had a nose piece be as big as it can be to fit that through.
Oh my gosh, that's wild.
And before we thought, we see these excavation sites with the skeletons, and we had these nose ornaments through the actual septum of the nose.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this is that they never were. They always had a certain type of necklace associated with them. So about 10 years ago, we thought, this is what men wore. Yeah. We can say now the nose ornaments were strictly worn by women.
No way.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
So wild. That's so cool. So the other thing I have to ask you, because there is so much controversy now and so much conversation about cultural assimilation and what we're taking away and what's the difference between supporting and protecting a culture, wanting to grow and learn and be a part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've lived with the tribes. You have tattoos on your body from the tribes. And do you ever have people who come across you and just go, how dare you?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, though, with our times, with the way various countries and their governments work, these artifacts could simply be excavated from, actually, this is a true story, they'll be excavated from, let's say, an airport in Mexico, right? Or in Peru. And the construction workers don't know. And they'll just keep on moving. And they'll have the bulldozer go through. And you'll never once know that it was ever there.
Wow.
On the other spectrum, too, some of these items, will be in museums. And they'll be hiding back in the storage units for 20 years. And you would never know. And they're just there, just sitting and collecting dust. And so my thought is, again, with the Embody collection, the intention is to not only teach everyone about human history and where we've come from and where we're going, but a certain proceeds will actually go to what we call internationalsurvival.org. And it actually gives back to tribes, such as like in the Yucatan Peninsula right now. There's land being taken over by American corporations, and there are people that live there. They're being either forced to leave or worse things happen than that. And so I donate to companies or that organization to help preserve those lands, to help preserve their traditions.
How can people learn more about it?
You can actually go directly on the embodymuseum.org website, and you can learn all about there. There's actually a donation link on there as well, lots of tutorial videos and whatnot.
So if you were going to tell me now, I mean, obviously fitness will forever be a part of your life.
Sure.
What do you see in 5 years and when we're old, when you and I are looking at each other in our 50s, well, that's not old. My parents would probably kill me for saying that. But like as we're getting into 50s, 60s, and then when we're grandpa. So 5 years, when we're maturing, and then when we're in our rocking chairs. What do you see? Right
now, within 5 years or so, I want to keep on doing these exhibitions. I've been really blessed enough to showcase these pieces at a number of museums in Wyoming and California, and I'm hoping to do one here in Kansas City next year. And obviously, too, though, I've been presently working on a book called Embody, and it talks about some of the pictures. It actually will show the images I photographed of the tribes and some of their amazing pieces. And I think that as long as that message gets across, that's going to be like my 5-year goal. When I'm old, I honestly don't want this to go away. I would love for these pieces to be donated to another museum who would treat them with the same respect.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will happen, and I'll be in a rocking chair in Mexico.
I love it.
Yeah.
So if you were going to leave our guests, well, I guess we only have one guest, which is Aaron. But I guess I look at the people in the camera and I say, hey, you're also guests on the show or people listening. I don't know if you could give a little bit of words of wisdom from coming from such a dark place into a place of learning and growing. And we all have darkness in our lives. We always will.
Sure.
But I guess what words of advice could you share in terms of your true calling and kind of being drawn to the light within yourself?
My friend, I don't know why this simple quote lingers in my head, and I heard it about like 4 or 5 years ago. Her name is Jade Electra. She's also in Huntington Beach. She told me just really nonchalantly, she goes, just love people with no expectations, or just love life with no expectations. And that resonates with me, because going back in that dark spot where I wasn't being loved because of something that they disagreed with, that hurts you. Yeah. And the things that I've learned over the years, you can love a complete stranger. You can have that human connection with them and not without expectation, just connect. So I always think of that quote, like this: love without expectation.
And then what about self-love? Because I do think
Absolutely.
that so many of us
Yeah.
are like, how did you find it? How do you find it each day? Because it's so easier for me to go into self-loathing than it is to love. So
I just, I don't know. I think over the times and years, I learned that we're all not different. We're really not that different. We all come from the same vein, whether you are in Indonesia, up in the jungles, or you are someone who maybe disagrees with my lifestyle. I really do genuinely feel that humanity always, with love, always wins.
Yeah, human connection.
Human connection.
Human connection. I think it's when we obsess about differences, and then when we try to be like, it's not about being all the same in terms of like, we all look the same, we all be the same, we have to think the same way. It's about this same quality of we're freaking humans.
We're all human.
Yeah.
We all have a beating heart.
Yeah.
And we only have one life.
Totally. Yeah. Well, as we close up today, it's interesting to bring people to you that are a part of my life. I'm pretty protective of my friends, and I'm a loyal. I'm wearing my lion today. Ooh. From Dylan Lex, cool. Because there's a lioness in me when I think about my friends and I think about their stories and honoring them. And I guess I ask you today that if you listen to Christian's story, the one thing I take from it as his friend is that we all have moments in our life with pain, and we all have moments of adversity, and a lot of times we feel so alone. And that room you describe, right now we're still kind of all in it with COVID, and some of us are even more in it because of health issues or financial issues. And I guess all I want to remind you is that you actually can open the door or lift the roof off the ceiling. Absolutely. And let the light in. It just takes some time. Yeah. And you got to love yourself. Absolutely. And you got to show kindness to others. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You can find Christian on Instagram. He is on, are you Christian Noni?
Christian Noni, yeah.
Yeah. And you'll find a lot more with his passion with the Embody Museum. That's where I would direct you. Yeah. That's his life's work. I think it's pretty fucking cool. Or you can come to our health club and take our classes.
Yeah,
so you know it. I love it.
I'm down.
I love it. Well, thank you again for joining me. And again, if you like this episode, please subscribe to the Seraphine Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.